Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, The Foundation. Gabriel Clark stood 6'3" with the build of a man who'd earned everything through blood, sweat, and calculated decisions. At 42, his presence commanded attention in every room he entered. Broad shoulders that had once swung hammers on construction sites, hands that bore the permanent calluses of honest labor, and steel-gray eyes that missed nothing. Those eyes had watched empires rise and fall, partnerships dissolve, and competitors disappear into bankruptcy, always by his careful design. The transformation from the scrawny kid in Riverside Trailer Park to the most feared businessman in the Tri-County area hadn't happened overnight. Gabriel's childhood had been a masterclass in survival, raised by a single mother who worked 3 jobs just to keep food on their fold-out table. Linda Clark had cleaned offices at night, stocked shelves during early morning shifts, and waited tables on weekends, all while raising a son who watched her sacrifice everything for his future. "Never forget where you come from," she told him countless times, her hands raw from industrial cleaning chemicals. "But never let anyone keep you there." Gabriel had taken those words to heart, but he'd added his own philosophy. Never let anyone who helped you climb forget the price of betraying you on the way up. Every favor came with interest. Every kindness had an expiration date. Every relationship was a contract with terms that were non-negotiable. The Clark family mansion sat on 12 acres in the hills overlooking the city, a testament to Gabriel's rise from nothing. The house itself was a study in controlled excess. 32 rooms of imported marble, hand-carved woodwork, and technological systems that cost more than most people's homes. Every brick, every fixture, every carefully manicured garden spoke of a man who refused to accept anything less than perfection. The circular driveway could accommodate 20 cars, though Gabriel rarely entertained more than a select few who had proven their loyalty beyond question. But the crown jewel of his empire wasn't the house, the cars, or even the business. It was his family, or what he had believed was his family. Gabriel's construction empire consisted of 3 companies operating across 4 states. Clark Construction handled residential developments. Clark Commercial managed office buildings and retail centers, and Clark Infrastructure secured the lucrative government contracts that built highways, bridges, and municipal buildings. Each company employed over 200 workers, and Gabriel knew every foreman's name, every project manager's strengths, and every potential weakness in his organizational structure. He'd started with nothing but a pickup truck and a willingness to work jobs other contractors wouldn't touch, crawling through sewage to repair foundation leaks, demolishing condemned buildings in dangerous neighborhoods, rebuilding homes after natural disasters when insurance companies dragged their feet. Gabriel had learned early that the jobs nobody wanted were often the most profitable, and that desperation made customers very generous. His reputation in the industry was legendary. Gabriel Clark delivered on time, under budget, and with quality that exceeded specifications. He also destroyed anyone who tried to cheat him, undercut his bids, or steal his workers. 3 companies had gone bankrupt after attempting to poach Gabriel's best employees. 2 city councilmen had lost their seats after taking bribes from Gabriel's competitors. A union leader who tried to shake him down had ended up under federal investigation for embezzlement. Denise Clark, his wife of 15 years, had been the golden prize he'd won after clawing his way up from the trailer park. She'd grown up in Maple Heights, the kind of neighborhood where doctors and lawyers raised their children, where failure was rare and poverty was something that happened to other people. When they'd first met at a charity auction, Gabriel bidding on construction services, Denise representing high-end real estate, she dismissed him as rough around the edges, too intense, too focused on business to be interesting. Gabriel's pursuit of Denise had been like everything else in his life: methodical, relentless, and ultimately successful. He'd learned her favorite restaurants and arranged to be seen there. He'd bought properties in neighborhoods where she showed houses, giving her easy sales and generous commissions. He'd attended charity events he had no interest in, donating amounts that guaranteed his name would be mentioned alongside hers in society pages. The The courtship had taken 2 years, but Gabriel never doubted the outcome. Denise represented everything his mother had worked for: class, education, social connections that money alone couldn't buy. She was beautiful in the understated way of old money families, intelligent enough to run her own business, and ambitious enough to appreciate what Gabriel could offer her. Their wedding had been the social event of the season, held at the country club where Gabriel had once worked as a groundskeeper during high school. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. The trailer park kid had not only made it to the heights of society, he'd conquered them completely. 300 guests had witnessed Gabriel Clark claim his place among the elite he'd spent his life fighting to join. Emma Clark, now 11, was the light of Gabriel's world. She'd inherited her mother's refined features and her father's steel spine, creating a combination that promised she'd never need to fight for respect the way Gabriel had. Emma was intelligent, fierce, and carried herself with the confidence of someone who'd never known poverty or powerlessness. Gabriel made sure she understood the value of loyalty, the importance of family, and the consequences of betrayal. Lessons he taught through stories and examples, never imagining she'd witnessed them firsthand. Gabriel's relationship with his younger brother Sean had always been complicated. Where Gabriel was driven and calculating, Sean was impulsive and weak. The 3-year age gap between them had felt like a generation during their childhood. While Gabriel worked after-school jobs and studied construction techniques at the library, Sean had drifted through high school without direction or ambition. Sean had married Jamie Wallace when they were both 22, a rushed wedding necessitated by Jamie's pregnancy with Jake. Jamie came from a solid middle-class family. Her father was a high school principal, her mother a nurse. They were good people who'd raised a daughter with traditional values and reasonable expectations. Jamie had been accepted to nursing school and planned to become a pediatric nurse, dreams that got derailed when Jake arrived earlier than expected. Gabriel had helped them repeatedly over the years, always justified as family obligation, but increasingly feeling like charity thrown at people who couldn't appreciate its value. He'd paid for Sean's failed attempt at starting a landscaping business, covered the down payment on their modest 3-bedroom house, and provided Jake with opportunities the boy would never have had otherwise: private school tuition, summer camps, sports equipment, and college fund contributions that Sean never seemed to acknowledge. Family is everything, Gabriel often said, though his definition of family came with strict conditions: loyalty, respect, and absolute trust. Break those conditions, and Gabriel Clark became a very different man entirely. He'd learned from watching his mother sacrifice everything for people who never appreciated her efforts. Gabriel's generosity came with invisible contracts, and he kept meticulous records of every favor, every kindness, every investment in another person's future. The evening of October 15th started like any other in the Clark household. Gabriel worked late at his downtown office, a 15-story building he'd bought and renovated into the headquarters for his construction empire. The top 3 floors housed Clark Construction's executive offices, with Gabriel's corner suite offering panoramic views of the city he'd helped build. The walls were covered with framed photographs of his projects: shopping centers, office buildings, residential developments that bore his architectural signature. He'd been reviewing contract for the Riverside Commons project, a massive mixed-use development that would cement his position as the city's premier contractor. The project included 200 residential units, 50,000 square feet of retail space, and a 12-story office tower that would house his new regional headquarters. The contract represented 18 months of work and $47 million in revenue, the kind of project that would fund Emma's Ivy League education and secure Denise's social position for generations. Gabriel's attention to detail was legendary in the industry. Every contract clause was scrutinized, every subcontractor was vetted, every timeline was planned with military precision. He employed a full-time staff of lawyers, accountants, and project managers whose sole job was ensuring that Gabriel Clark never entered into agreements that could be used against him. The Riverside Commons contracts were perfect, every contingency covered, every liability shifted to other parties, every profit margin protected. Denise was supposedly at home with Emma, helping with homework and maintaining the domestic routine that Gabriel valued above all else. The Clark household ran on schedules that were planned weeks in advance. Emma's school activities, Denise's real estate appointments, Gabriel's business meetings. Disruptions were rare and usually temporary, handled with the same efficiency Gabriel brought to his construction projects. What Gabriel didn't know was that 3 months earlier, Denise had attended her 15-year high school reunion and reconnected with Vincent Jackson. Vincent had been 2 years ahead of Denise in school, the kind of popular athlete who'd seemed destined for greatness, but had settled for ordinary success. He'd gone to college on a baseball scholarship, studied architecture, and returned to the area after his divorce to start his own firm. Vincent Jackson possessed the one thing Gabriel had never offered: gentle words and easy charm. Where Gabriel was intense and focused, Vincent was relaxed and attentive. Where Gabriel discussed business and schedules, Vincent talked about art, travel, and dreams deferred. Where Gabriel made love with the same controlled intensity he brought to everything else, Vincent offered tenderness and emotional connection that Denise had forgotten she craved. Their affair had started with innocent coffee meetings, progressed to long lunches, and escalated into twice-weekly encounters at Vincent's downtown apartment. Denise told herself it was temporary, a harmless emotional outlet that didn't threaten her marriage or her future. She convinced herself that Gabriel was too focused on business to notice her growing distance, too confident in his control to question her loyalty. Sean and Jamie were hosting a sleepover at their house, an arrangement that had become routine over the past year. Jake, now 14, enjoyed having his younger cousin visit, and the sleepovers gave Gabriel and Denise time alone together, time that Denise had been using to meet Vincent while Gabriel worked late at the office. But this particular evening would shatter the careful routines that governed the Clark family's existence, revealing betrayals that would destroy some lives and transform others beyond recognition. Chapter 2. The Call in the Dark. At 2:17 a.m., Gabriel's phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Dad, something's wrong. Jake's dad is acting weird and won't let me leave." Gabriel was instantly alert, his construction worker's instincts kicking in. Emma wasn't a dramatic child. If she said something was wrong, it was wrong. She'd inherited Gabriel's ability to assess situations quickly and accurately, a trait he'd encouraged by teaching her to trust her instincts and speak up when something didn't feel right. He immediately called Sean's house, letting it ring 15 times before hanging up. The silence on the other end was more disturbing than a busy signal would have been. Gabriel tried Jamie's cell phone next, his anxiety mounting with each ring. "Gabriel?" Jamie's voice was tense, almost whispered, with background noise that sounded like television or music playing too loudly. "Everything's fine. The kids are just playing video games. You know how they get when they're up late. Put him on the phone. Now. She's in the bathroom right now. Look, I'll have her call you in the morning, okay? Sean's just being strict about bedtime. You know how he gets when he's had a few beers." The casual mention of Sean drinking while supervising children made Gabriel's blood pressure spike. Sean's relationship with alcohol had been a concern for years, though Gabriel had hoped his brother would exercise better judgment when caring for Emma. "Jamie, I want to talk to my daughter. Wake her up if you have to. Gabriel, please. Don't make this into a big drama. Sean will be upset if you..." The line went dead. Gabriel stared at his phone, every instinct screaming that something was wrong. He'd built his empire by trusting his gut, and his gut was telling him his daughter was in trouble. He threw on clothes and drove to Sean's house, a 20-minute journey through empty streets that he made in 12. Gabriel's pickup truck, the same model he'd driven as a young contractor, though now customized with luxury features, ate up the miles while his mind raced through possibilities. Sean's drinking had escalated recently, especially after losing his job at the lumberyard. Jamie's nursing school debts were mounting, and their marriage had been strained for months. Sean's house sat on a dead-end street in one of the city's older neighborhoods, a modest 3-bedroom ranch that Gabriel had helped them buy 8 years earlier. The house was dark except for a single light in the basement, visible through windows that were supposed to be covered by curtains. Gabriel noticed immediately that Sean's car was parked crooked in the driveway, and there were tire tracks in the front yard that suggested erratic driving. Gabriel pounded on the front door until Sean answered, clearly drunk and agitated. His brother's appearance was shocking. Disheveled hair, bloodshot eyes, and the unmistakable smell of alcohol mixed with something else, something chemical that Gabriel couldn't immediately identify. Gabriel? What the hell are you doing here? Where's Emma? She's fine. She's downstairs with the other kids. Sean's words slurred together, and he swayed slightly as he spoke. Jamie told you everything's okay. Gabriel pushed past his brother and headed for the basement stairs, ignoring Sean's protests. The basement was supposed to be Jake's playroom, with video game consoles, a pool table, and comfortable seating where the kids could hang out safely. What Gabriel saw made his blood freeze. Emma sat huddled in a corner with two other children, Jake's friends from school, all of them looking terrified. Jake was nowhere to be seen, and there was a strong smell of alcohol and what Gabriel now recognized as marijuana smoke. Scattered around the room were empty beer bottles, a bong that hadn't been there during Gabriel's last visit, and what looked like prescription pill bottles poorly hidden behind boxes of Christmas decorations. Emma, come here. Now. His daughter ran to him, tears streaming down her face. Dad, Mr. Sean was acting really scary, and Jake disappeared upstairs, and they wouldn't let us leave. He kept saying weird things and laughing at nothing. Gabriel scooped Emma into his arms and turned to face Sean, who stood swaying at the bottom of the stairs. Behind Sean, Gabriel could see evidence of a party that had gotten out of control. More bottles, drug paraphernalia, and what looked like women's clothing scattered around a makeshift seating area. Sean, what the hell is going on here? Nothing, Gabriel. Just having some fun. You wouldn't understand. You're always so serious, so controlling. Can't a man relax in his own house? Gabriel's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, a tone that had made grown men step back and reconsider their life choices. Where is Jake? He's upstairs, sleeping. Look, nobody got hurt. Just take Emma and go. This is my house, and I can do what I want here. Gabriel carried Emma upstairs and found Jake passed out in his bedroom, clearly having consumed alcohol and possibly other substances. The boy was breathing but unresponsive, his face flushed and his pulse rapid. Gabriel immediately called 911, then sat with Emma while paramedics worked on Jake and police took statement from the terrified children. The investigation revealed that Sean had been hosting adult parties in his basement for several months, events that included drug use, excessive drinking, and what police delicately described as inappropriate activities. Jamie had been aware of some of the parties, but claimed she'd been assured that children would never be present during them. Jamie's whereabouts during the incident became a crucial part of the police investigation. Initial reports indicated she was working a night shift at the hospital, but hospital records showed she'd called in sick that evening. Further investigation revealed she'd been at Vincent Jackson's downtown apartment when the incident occurred, information that Gabriel learned when police contacted him as next of kin for Emma. Mrs. Clark was located at 412 Maple Street, apartment 3B. Detective Arnold Pugh informed Gabriel during a phone call the next morning. That's the residence of Vincent Jackson, an architect. She claimed she was discussing a real estate transaction, but given the timing and circumstances, we had some follow-up questions. Gabriel's world shifted on its axis. Vincent Jackson, the same architect Gabriel remembered from Denise's reunion stories, the one she'd mentioned running into several times recently. The same Vincent Jackson whose firm had been submitting suspiciously competitive bids on Gabriel's projects. By morning, Sean Clark was facing charges related to providing alcohol to minors, child endangerment, and possession of controlled substances. The local news picked up the story. Local business owner's brother arrested in child endangerment case. The story included details about Gabriel's construction empire, making it clear that Sean's actions reflected poorly on the entire Clark family. Gabriel's first priority was Emma's welfare. He arranged for her to stay with his mother while the immediate crisis was handled, then began the methodical process of cutting Sean out of his life completely. Properties that Sean part owned were transferred to Gabriel's sole control. Business relationships that included Sean were terminated. Financial support that Gabriel had provided for years was permanently suspended. But the discovery of Jamie's whereabouts led to questions Gabriel wasn't prepared for, questions that would reveal betrayals far deeper than his brother's weakness and selfishness. Chapter 3: Revelations and Rage. The discovery of Jamie's presence at Vincent Jackson's apartment during the crisis created questions that gnawed at Gabriel's methodical mind. Why would his sister-in-law be at another man's apartment at 2 a.m., especially an apartment belonging to an architect Gabriel had heard about from his own wife? The pieces didn't fit together logically, unless the logical conclusion was one Gabriel wasn't ready to accept. Gabriel's investigation skills, honed through years of vetting contractors and business partners, turned toward his own family with the focused intensity he usually reserved for major construction projects. He contacted Ralph Cooley, a private investigator who'd helped him expose embezzling employees and fraudulent suppliers in the past. Ralph was a former police detective who understood that Gabriel Clark paid well for thorough, discreet work. "I need you to look into my wife's activities over the past 6 months," Gabriel told Ralph during a meeting at a diner 30 miles outside the city. "Start with her real estate business, but I want to know everywhere she goes, everyone she meets, every appointment on her calendar." Ralph had worked for Gabriel long enough to understand that this wasn't a routine background check. "How deep do you want me to go?" "All the way to the bottom. Phone records, credit card statements, hotel registrations, restaurant charges. I want to know what she had for lunch 3 months ago and who she had it with." That kind of investigation takes time and costs money. Gabriel slid an envelope across the table. "Time is more important than money. I need answers within 48 hours. Ralph delivered his report in 36 hours, and it contained enough evidence to destroy Gabriel's world. Photographs showed Denise entering Vincent Jackson's apartment building multiple times over the past 3 months. Credit card records revealed charges at expensive restaurants and hotels on days when Denise claimed to be showing houses to clients. Phone records showed lengthy conversations between Denise and Vincent on evenings when Gabriel worked late at the office. But the most damning evidence was the text message transcripts Ralph had obtained through contacts in law enforcement. Screenshots of intimate exchanges between Denise and Vincent revealed not just an affair, but a betrayal that cut deeper than Gabriel had imagined possible. "Your husband is working on the Morrison project again tonight," one message from Denise read. "He'll be at the office until at least midnight, going over the foundation specs." Vincent's response chilled Gabriel's blood. "Perfect. That gives us plenty of time to discuss our own foundation. Speaking of which, did you get those timeline details he mentioned at dinner?" The messages revealed that Denise had been feeding Vincent inside information about Gabriel's business dealings, sharing details about upcoming projects, bidding strategies, and client relationships. Information she'd gathered from dinner conversations, overheard phone calls, and documents Gabriel had foolishly trusted her to see. Gabriel sat in his study, staring at the evidence spread across his mahogany desk. The room that had always been his sanctuary, filled with awards, framed newspaper articles about his business success, and photographs of construction projects he'd built from nothing, now felt like a crime scene. Every memory of the past 15 years was contaminated by the knowledge that his wife had been systematically betraying him while he built an empire to secure her future. Phone records showed calls between Denise and Vincent on their anniversary. Hotel charges appeared on dates when Gabriel had been out of town for business, trusting his wife to manage their household and care for their daughter. Restaurant bills documented romantic dinners that had occurred while Gabriel worked 16-hour days to fund Denise's lifestyle and Emma's private school education. The final revelation came when Gabriel cross-referenced Vincent's business activities with his own project timelines. Vincent Jackson's firm had submitted competitive bids on 5 major projects over the past 4 months, bids that seemed tailored specifically to undercut Gabriel's proposals by margins so narrow that they suggested inside knowledge of Gabriel's pricing strategies. The Harborview development contract, worth $12 million, had gone to Vincent's firm after they'd submitted a bid exactly 2% lower than Gabriel's. The municipal complex renovation, valued at $8 million, had been awarded to Vincent after his firm proposed a timeline that was impossibly tight unless they'd known Gabriel's construction schedule in advance. Most recently, the Riverside Commons project, Gabriel's flagship development that represented the culmination of his career, had been threatened by Vincent's competing proposal that incorporated design elements Gabriel had discussed with Denise during private conversations. Gabriel Clark had built his empire by being smarter, more ruthless, and more patient than his competitors. He'd survived the construction industry's cutthroat environment by destroying those who tried to cheat him and rewarding those who proved their loyalty. But he'd never imagined that the greatest threat to everything he'd built would come from inside his own home. The betrayal cut deeper than any business loss Gabriel had ever suffered. 15 years of marriage, and Denise had thrown it away for a man who was using her to steal Gabriel's life's work. But even worse than the personal betrayal was the professional humiliation. Vincent Jackson had been outmaneuvering Gabriel in business using intelligence gathered from Gabriel's own wife. Gabriel spent 3 days planning, 3 days remembering every lesson his brutal childhood had taught him about survival and revenge. His mother had died believing that good people who worked hard would eventually be rewarded, but Gabriel had learned a harsher truth. Good people who weren't willing to fight dirty would be destroyed by those who were. He'd forgiven Sean's weaknesses many times, had tolerated Jamie's entitlement, had overlooked Denise's increasing coldness and emotional distance. He'd told himself that family meant accepting imperfections, that love required patience and understanding. Those days were over. Gabriel's phone rang as he sat contemplating the evidence. It was Detective Pugh with updates on Sean's case. "Your brother's looking at serious time," the detective informed him. "The drugs we found weren't just marijuana. There were prescription pills that he doesn't have prescriptions for, and the quantities suggest distribution rather than personal use." "What does that mean for Emma's testimony?" "She won't have to testify if your brother takes a plea deal." "But Gabriel, there's something else you should know. We've been investigating this for weeks, and your brother was involved with some dangerous people. Drug suppliers who don't like loose ends." Gabriel processed this information with the same cold calculation he brought to business decisions. Sean's situation was spiraling beyond simple child endangerment into territory that could threaten Emma's safety and Gabriel's reputation. "What do you recommend?" "Your brother should take whatever deal the prosecutor offers, and you should consider increasing security for your family. These aren't people who respect boundaries." Gabriel hung up and made a decision that would define the rest of his life. Emma was staying with his mother until the immediate crisis passed, which gave Gabriel the privacy he needed to prepare. He called in favors from contacts in law enforcement, construction, and city planning. He liquidated certain investments quietly, moving money into untraceable accounts. Most importantly, he began documenting everything. Every betrayal, every stolen contract, every lie. Vincent Jackson had no idea that his romantic entanglement had put him in the crosshairs of a man who'd built an empire by systematically destroying anyone who challenged him. Denise had no idea that her husband's quiet acceptance of her recent distance had been careful observation, not oblivious trust. Gabriel Clark was about to remind them all why crossing him was the last mistake people made. Chapter 4. The Web Takes Shape. Gabriel's revenge would not be swift or simple. Men like Vincent Jackson and women like Denise thrived on drama and immediate gratification. Gabriel would give them neither. Instead, he would weave a web so carefully constructed that they would destroy themselves trying to escape it, never understanding that every move they made had been anticipated and planned for. His first move was surgical and brilliant. Gabriel had discovered through Ralph Cooley's investigation that Vincent's architectural firm, Jackson & Associates, was heavily leveraged and behind on several payments. The firm's primary lender was First National Bank, where Gabriel had significant influence through his construction loans and personal relationships built over 15 years of profitable business. Gabriel scheduled a lunch meeting with Malcolm Finch, the bank's president and a man who'd profited handsomely from Gabriel's construction empire. Their relationship went back 12 years, built on mutual respect and the kind of trust that came from consistently profitable partnerships. Malcolm, I need to discuss a potential problem, Gabriel said over steaks at the city's most expensive restaurant. It's come to my attention that Jackson and Associates has been using inside information to compete against my bids. Information they couldn't have obtained legally. Malcolm Finch was a shrewd banker who understood the construction industry's competitive nature. That's a serious accusation, Gabriel. Do you have evidence? Gabriel produced a carefully prepared folder containing side-by-side comparisons of his project proposals and Vincent's winning bids. The similarities were too precise to be coincidental. Vincent's proposals addressed concerns that Gabriel had discussed only with family members, incorporated solutions to problems that hadn't been publicly identified, and proposed timelines that were impossible unless someone knew Gabriel's construction schedules. This information could only have come from someone with access to my private business discussions, Gabriel explained. Someone who knew my strategies, my timelines, and my pricing structures. Malcolm studied the documents with the focused attention of a man who'd built his career on analyzing risk. This suggests corporate espionage. Have you contacted law enforcement? I prefer to handle business problems through business channels, Gabriel replied. Jackson and Associates is already struggling financially. If they're also engaging in unethical practices, perhaps it's time to reevaluate their creditworthiness. The conversation was brief but effective. Within 48 hours, Jackson and Associates received notice that their loans were being called for immediate review. The bank's sudden scrutiny of Vincent's firm's finances revealed irregularities that weren't technically illegal, but suggested poor management and questionable business practices. Simultaneously, Gabriel began acquiring properties through shell companies managed by his lawyer, Charles Parker. Not just any properties, specifically buildings where Vincent had ongoing projects. Gabriel's network of business relationships, built over 15 years of successful construction work, gave him access to information about property sales before they became public knowledge. The genius of Gabriel's strategy was its subtlety. He purchased buildings at above-market prices, making the sales attractive to current owners while positioning himself to control Vincent's working environment. Overnight, Vincent found himself dealing with new landlords who had very different ideas about construction timelines, permit requirements, and contract fulfillment. Gabriel's shell companies, registered in states where ownership records were harder to trace, began imposing additional requirements on Vincent's projects. Environmental inspections that hadn't been required under previous ownership. Safety compliance reviews that delayed construction schedules. Permit modifications that required expensive redesigns of work already in progress. Each requirement was technically legal and reasonably justified. Gabriel's experience in construction gave him intimate knowledge of building codes, safety regulations, and permit processes that could be used to create legitimate obstacles for projects that weren't properly planned or adequately funded. Vincent Jackson found himself fighting fires on multiple fronts without understanding that they were all connected. His loan review was consuming time and energy that should have been focused on project management. His construction schedules were being disrupted by new requirements from property owners who seemed determined to make his life difficult. His cash flow was being squeezed by delays and additional expenses that were eating into already thin profit margins. Meanwhile, Denise was struggling with her own crisis, unaware that her husband was orchestrating Vincent's destruction. Gabriel had become even more attentive recently, bringing her flowers, planning romantic dinners, and showing genuine interest in her real estate career. His newfound attention confused her, exactly as Gabriel intended. "You seem stressed lately," Gabriel said over dinner one evening, his voice warm with false concern. "Maybe you should take that vacation you mentioned. You've been working so hard." Denise nearly choked on her wine. She had mentioned wanting to go away with Vincent, but not to Gabriel. The fact that he seemed to know about her travel desires without her having discussed them directly was unsettling. I didn't think you were listening when I said that. I always listen to you, sweetheart. In fact, I've been thinking we should renew our vows. 15 years deserves a celebration, don't you think? The suggestion terrified Denise. A vow renewal would make leaving Gabriel even more complicated, especially with Vincent's business struggling recently. She noticed Vincent becoming increasingly stressed about work problems, though he insisted it was just temporary setbacks that would resolve themselves. Gabriel watched his wife's discomfort with the satisfaction of a chess master, seeing his opponent realize they were trapped. Every move he made served multiple purposes, tightening the noose while maintaining his facade of devoted husband. "We could have the ceremony at the Grandview Hotel," Gabriel continued, mentioning the city's most prestigious venue. "February would be perfect, right around Valentine's Day. I'm thinking 200 guests, maybe more. All our friends and business associates, your family, everyone who matters to us." The scale Gabriel was proposing would make the vow renewal a major social event, one that would be impossible to cancel without creating a scandal that would destroy Denise's reputation and business relationships. Most of her real estate clients came through Gabriel's business connections, builders, developers, and investors who worked with Clark Construction on major projects. Gabriel began planning the vow renewal with the same meticulous attention he brought to construction projects. He hired the city's most expensive wedding planner, reserved the Grandview Hotel's ballroom, and started sending save-the-date cards to everyone who mattered in their social and business circles. Meanwhile, Sean sat in county jail awaiting trial, and Jamie had been forced to move in with her parents after losing her job when the scandal broke. Gabriel visited Sean once, bringing him legal documents to sign, papers that Sean, desperate and ashamed, signed without reading carefully. Those documents transferred Sean's stake in several family properties to Gabriel, consolidating Gabriel's control over assets Sean didn't even remember he owned. The transfers were structured as debt forgiveness for loans Gabriel had made over the years, making them appear generous rather than predatory. "I'm trying to help you, Sean," Gabriel told his brother through the jail's security glass. "When you get out, you'll need a fresh start. These property transfers eliminate your debts and give you a clean slate." Sean, broken by his circumstances and grateful for any help, thanked Gabriel profusely. He had no idea that he'd just signed away his share of properties worth over $2 million, assets that had been held in family trust their mother had established before her death. The genius of Gabriel's plan was its patience. While Vincent struggled with increasingly impossible deadlines and financial pressure, and Denise wrestled with guilt and confusion about the vow renewal, Gabriel methodically eliminated their options. He was creating a situation where they would have to make desperate choices that would damn them more thoroughly than any single act of revenge could achieve. Ralph coolly continued providing intelligence about Vincent and Denise's activities, tracking their meetings and communications with the thoroughness of a military operation. Gabriel knew about every phone call, every text message, every hotel reservation they made. Their privacy was an illusion he allowed them to maintain while he gathered evidence and tightened his grip. By Christmas, Vincent Jackson was drowning in problems he couldn't solve and pressures he couldn't understand. His business was failing. His relationship with Denise was strained by her husband's increased attention, and his stress was affecting his health and judgment. Gabriel Clark, meanwhile, was planning the social event of the season, a vow renewal ceremony that would publicly celebrate his marriage while privately marking the beginning of the final phase of his revenge. Chapter 5: Pressure Points. By December, Vincent Jackson was drowning in a sea of problems that seemed to multiply faster than he could address them. His architectural firm had lost 3 major contracts when new building owners imposed impossible demands that forced project cancellations. His loan review had resulted in accelerated payment schedules that were bleeding his company dry, with First National Bank requiring weekly financial reports and threatening immediate foreclosure on his office space. Most mysteriously, permits for his ongoing projects were being delayed or rejected for increasingly technical violations that seemed designed to bankrupt him. The Harbor View development, which should have been his firm's salvation, was stalled because of environmental concerns that hadn't existed during the initial planning phase. The municipal complex renovation was on hold due to structural integrity questions that required expensive engineering consultations. Every project Vincent touched seemed to develop complications that were technically legitimate but practically devastating. Vincent had no idea that Gabriel Clark was orchestrating his destruction through a network of contacts, shell companies, and carefully placed pressure. Gabriel's 15 years in the construction industry had given him relationships with building inspectors, permit officials, environmental consultants, and property managers throughout the region. A quiet word from Gabriel Clark about concerns regarding a project was enough to trigger reviews that could delay construction for months. All Vincent knew was that his affair with Denise Clark had become the only bright spot in an increasingly dark world. But even that relationship was becoming strained as Denise struggled with her own pressures. "Leave him," Vincent urged Denise during one of their Wednesday afternoon meetings at his apartment. "My business problems are temporary, but I can't keep watching you go home to that controlling bastard every night." Denise was torn between her attraction to Vincent and her growing fear of Gabriel's reaction if he discovered their affair. Gabriel's recent romantic gestures felt simultaneously genuine and suffocating. The vow renewal ceremony was scheduled for February 14th, and Gabriel had already invited over 200 guests, including every major figure in their social and business circles. "Vincent, you don't understand what leaving Gabriel would mean," Denise tried to explain. "He's not just my husband. He controls everything in my life. My business, my social connections, my financial security. Most of my real estate clients come through his construction projects. So we'll build new connections. My firm is going through a rough patch, but your firm is failing." Denise's frustration finally boiled over. "You've lost every major project, your office lease is in jeopardy, and you're asking me to give up everything for a man who can't even keep his own business afloat." The harsh words stung Vincent because they were true. His architectural firm, which had been thriving just 6 months earlier, was now barely surviving from week to week. What he couldn't tell Denise was that he suspected her husband was somehow connected to his troubles, though he had no evidence to support his paranoia. What neither Vincent nor Denise realized was that Gabriel was monitoring their communications through spy software he had professionally installed on Denise's phone and computer. Every text message, every email, every phone call was being recorded and analyzed by Ralph Cooley's team of technical specialists. Their privacy was an illusion Gabriel allowed them to maintain while he gathered evidence for the final phase of his plan. Gabriel's next move was particularly cruel in its psychological impact. He arranged for Emma to spend Christmas week with Denise's parents, then surprise his wife with a romantic trip to the Bahamas. The vacation was Gabriel's Christmas gift to Denise, a week at a luxury resort where he could focus entirely on her while removing her from Vincent's influence. For 7 days, Gabriel played the role of devoted husband perfectly, attentive, loving, passionate. He made love to his wife with an intensity that reminded her why she'd married him, while secretly photographing her moments of genuine happiness. The resort's professional photographers captured images of the couple embracing on the beach, sharing romantic dinners, and looking genuinely in love. Those photographs would later serve a specific purpose in Gabriel's plan, but during the vacation itself, they documented something real. Despite her affair, despite her betrayals, Denise found herself falling in love with her husband again. Gabriel's complete attention, freed from the usual distractions of business and social obligations, reminded her of the man who'd pursued her so relentlessly 15 years earlier. "I'd forgotten how romantic you could be," Denise told Gabriel as they watched the sunset from their private balcony on their last night in the Bahamas. Gabriel held her close, knowing that this moment of genuine connection would make her eventual punishment more devastating. "I've been thinking about us lately, about what really matters. The business, the money, the social obligations. None of that means anything if we don't have each other." Denise felt tears in her eyes, moved by what seemed like Gabriel's emotional vulnerability. "I love you," she whispered, and in that moment, she meant it completely. "I love you too," Gabriel replied, and the terrifying truth was that he did love her, even knowing about her betrayal, even while planning her destruction. Gabriel's love came with conditions and consequences that Denise was only beginning to understand. Upon returning from their trip, Denise found herself more conflicted than ever. Gabriel seemed to be changing, becoming the man she'd fallen in love with 15 years earlier. Meanwhile, Vincent was becoming increasingly desperate and demanding, pressuring her to make decisions she wasn't ready to make while his business collapsed around him. The pressure mounted when Jamie Wallace contacted Denise with disturbing news. Sean's trial was approaching, and the family was facing financial ruin from legal costs. Jamie had been forced to take a job as a grocery store cashier after losing her nursing position when the scandal broke, and she was struggling to support herself and Jake while Sean remained in jail. "I know Gabriel is angry with Sean," Jamie pleaded during a tearful phone call, "but Jake didn't do anything wrong. He's in therapy, he's struggling in school, and he keeps asking when his father is coming home." When Denise tentatively broached the subject with Gabriel, his response was immediate and firm. "Sean made his choices. He put our daughter in danger, Denise. Some lines can't be uncrossed." "But Jamie and Jake didn't do anything wrong," Denise protested. "Jake is just a kid, and Jamie wasn't even there when it happened." Gabriel looked at his wife with eyes that seemed to see straight through her. Jamie was at Vincent Jackson's apartment while her son was being poisoned with drugs and alcohol. She abandoned her responsibilities as a mother to pursue her own selfish desires. Sometimes innocent people get hurt when others make selfish choices. "That's not my fault. It's theirs." The conversation left Denise deeply unsettled, though she couldn't articulate why. Gabriel's words carried a weight that suggested he was talking about more than just Sean and Jamie's situation. The way he mentioned Vincent Jackson by name, with no surprise or curiosity about Jamie's presence there, made Denise wonder exactly how much her husband knew about that night. Gabriel's refusal to help Jamie and Jake was calculated to increase pressure on Denise while demonstrating the consequences of betraying his trust. He wanted Denise to see exactly what happened to family members who violated his rules, to understand that his mercy had limits that had already been exceeded. The vow renewal planning continued with military precision. Gabriel hired the city's most expensive caterer, ordered flowers from 3 different florists, and arranged for a string quartet that had performed at society weddings for decades. Every detail was designed to create an event that would be remembered by everyone who attended, and impossible for Denise to escape without destroying her reputation. As February approached, Denise felt trapped between 2 impossible choices: go through with the vow renewal ceremony while carrying on her affair, or confess to Gabriel and face consequences she couldn't imagine. Either choice felt like it would destroy something essential about her life. Vincent, meanwhile, was reaching his own breaking point. His business was failing, his relationship with Denise was strained, and his paranoia about Gabriel's involvement in his troubles was growing stronger every day. He began making the mistakes that Gabriel had been patiently waiting for, desperate decisions that would provide the final evidence needed to destroy him completely. Chapter 6: The Trap Springs. January brought Vincent Jackson to the breaking point Gabriel had been carefully orchestrating. Vincent's business was hemorrhaging money at an unsustainable rate. His contractors were abandoning projects mid-construction, and his reputation in the industry was crumbling faster than he could damage control. The stress was affecting his health. He lost 15 pounds, developed insomnia, and started drinking heavily to cope with the mounting pressure. In desperation, Vincent made the mistake Gabriel had been waiting for. He approached Gabriel directly at a Chamber of Commerce event, cornering him near the bar during the networking portion of the evening. "Gabriel, we need to talk," Vincent said, his voice carrying the desperation of a drowning man. "I know we're competitors, but I think someone's systematically targeting my business." Gabriel studied Vincent with the expression of a man encountering a minor annoyance, though internally he was savoring this moment he'd planned for months. Vincent looked haggard, desperate, and exactly like the broken man Gabriel intended him to become. "That's a serious accusation, Vincent. Do you have evidence?" "Nothing concrete, but the pattern is too consistent to be coincidence. Projects failing, permits being denied, financing getting pulled, property owners suddenly changing requirements. It's like someone with serious influence wants me destroyed." Gabriel nodded sympathetically, playing his role perfectly. The construction business can be brutal, especially for smaller firms. "Maybe you're overextended? I've seen a lot of good men fail because they took on more than they could handle." This isn't about being overextended, Vincent insisted, his voice rising slightly before he caught himself and lowered it. Someone is deliberately sabotaging my projects. Someone with connections to city planning, building inspection, and property management. That would require significant resources and influence, Gabriel observed mildly. Do you have enemies with that kind of power? Vincent stared at Gabriel for a long moment, paranoia and desperation warring in his eyes. He couldn't directly accuse Gabriel without evidence, but the implications hung in the air between them. I guess that's what I need to figure out, Vincent said finally. Gabriel clapped him on the shoulder with false sympathy. I hope you do. Uncertainty can destroy a man's judgment almost as quickly as his business. Let me know if there's anything I can do to help. The conversation was brief, but Gabriel noted Vincent's desperation with satisfaction. A desperate man was a controllable man, and Gabriel was about to offer Vincent exactly what he needed, with strings attached that would hang him. 2 days later, Gabriel contacted Vincent through intermediaries with a proposal that seemed like salvation. Jackson and Associates could bid on a massive residential development project called Riverside Commons Phase 2, one large enough to solve all of Vincent's financial problems. The project included 300 residential units, a shopping center, and recreational facilities that would require extensive architectural planning. The catch was that the project required partnering with Clark Construction as the primary contractor. Vincent would be working directly under Gabriel, but the architectural commission would be substantial enough to save his company and restore his reputation in the industry. Gabriel's intermediaries, lawyers and project managers who worked for his shell companies, presented the offer as a standard business partnership. Vincent would provide architectural services, Gabriel would handle construction management, and profits would be split according to industry standards. The contract terms appeared generous, with milestone payments that would provide immediate cash flow relief for Vincent's struggling firm. Vincent knew it was dangerous to work so closely with his lover's husband, but financial desperation overrode caution. His company was weeks away from bankruptcy, his office lease was in default, and his employees were looking for other jobs. The Riverside Commons project represented his only chance to survive professionally. What Vincent didn't realize was that Gabriel had structured the partnership agreement with the same meticulous attention to detail he brought to all his business contracts. Hidden within the standard language were clauses that gave Gabriel broad authority over project decisions, payment schedules, and quality standards. Vincent was essentially signing a contract that made him Gabriel's employee rather than his partner. Meanwhile, Denise was struggling with her own crisis. Gabriel had become increasingly physical in their relationship since returning from their Bahamas trip. Not violent, but intensely passionate in a way that felt both exciting and possessive. He seemed to want her constantly, making love to her with an urgency that left her breathless and confused. Gabriel's newfound passion wasn't random. It was calculated psychological warfare designed to create emotional confusion and dependency. He was using physical intimacy to rebuild emotional connections while simultaneously documenting Denise's responses for later use. Hidden cameras in their bedroom, installed by Ralph Cooley's technical team, captured Denise's genuine moments of passion and emotional vulnerability. The attention was intoxicating, but it also made her affair with Vincent feel sordid and cheap by comparison. Gabriel's lovemaking was confident, commanding, and completely focused on her pleasure in ways that reminded her why she'd fallen for him initially. Vincent's gentleness, which had once seemed refreshing, now felt weak and uncertain. The vow renewal ceremony was 6 weeks away, and Gabriel had spared no expense creating an event that would be remembered by everyone who attended. The guest list included city officials, business leaders, and every major figure in their social circle. The mayor would be attending, along with judges, construction industry executives, and real estate developers who controlled billions of dollars in local development. Backing out of the ceremony would be social suicide for Denise, destroying her reputation and eliminating her access to the business connections that made her real estate career possible. But going through with it while carrying on an affair felt like a betrayal beyond repair. Gabriel watched his wife's internal struggle with clinical interest. He was giving her every opportunity to confess, to end the affair, to choose their marriage over her selfish desires. The romantic trip, the passionate reconciliation, the vow renewal, all of it was designed to test whether Denise was capable of redemption. When Denise continued meeting Vincent in secret, even scheduling an encounter for the week before their vow renewal, Gabriel knew she had failed his test. The time for mercy had passed. Gabriel's surveillance team documented Denise's final meeting with Vincent at his apartment, capturing photographs and audio recordings that would serve as evidence in the final phase of his plan. The meeting was passionate but desperate, with both lovers struggling to reconcile their feelings with their impossible circumstances. After the vow renewal, things will have to change, Denise told Vincent as they lay together in his bed. Gabriel's planning this huge ceremony, and everyone will be watching us. I can't risk getting caught, so we'll be more careful, Vincent replied, though his voice carried no conviction. My business partnership with Gabriel actually makes things easier. I'll have legitimate reasons to communicate with him, which means I can stay closer to you. Neither of them realized that their conversation was being recorded by devices Gabriel's team had installed throughout Vincent's apartment during a maintenance visit arranged through the building's management company, another business relationship Gabriel had cultivated over the years. Gabriel reviewed the recordings in his study that evening, listening to his wife and her lover discuss their plans to continue betraying him even after publicly renewing their marriage vows. The evidence was overwhelming, legally admissible, and emotionally devastating. But Gabriel felt no sadness, only the cold satisfaction of a chess master executing a plan that had been months in development. Vincent Jackson and Denise Clark had made their choices. Now they would face the consequences of those choices in ways they couldn't imagine. The trap was set. All Gabriel had to do was spring it. Chapter 7. The Ceremony of Lies. The vow renewal ceremony was a masterpiece of public theater, orchestrated with the same precision Gabriel brought to his most complex construction projects. Gabriel spared no expense, creating an event that would be remembered by everyone who attended and serve his purposes perfectly. The ballroom of the Grandview Hotel was transformed into a winter wonderland, with ice sculptures, thousands of white roses, and crystal chandeliers creating an atmosphere of fairy tale romance. The guest list read like a directory of the city's power structure. Mayor Sandra Patterson attended with her husband, along with 3 city council members, the police chief, and the district attorney. Construction industry leaders filled multiple tables, including executives from Gabriel's biggest competitors who wouldn't dare refuse an invitation from Gabriel Clark. Real estate developers, banking executives, and society figures created an audience that represented millions of dollars in potential business relationships. Gabriel had also invited carefully selected members of the media, society photographers, business journalists, and bloggers who covered the city's social scene. Every moment of the ceremony would be documented, creating a permanent record of Denise's public commitment to their marriage just days after a final meeting with Vincent Jackson. Denise looked stunning in her designer gown, a custom creation that had cost more than most people's annual salary. The dress was Gabriel's gift to her, chosen specifically for its symbolic significance, pure white silk that represented the innocence and fidelity she'd abandoned months earlier. Close observers might have noticed the slight tremor in her hands as she walked down the aisle, or the way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes, but the overwhelming impression was of a woman deeply in love with her husband. Gabriel wore a custom tuxedo that emphasized his commanding presence, looking every inch the successful businessman who'd built an empire from nothing. His confidence was absolute, his smile genuine, because he knew exactly what was coming next. This ceremony wasn't just a renewal of vows. It was the opening act of a revenge that would destroy his enemies completely. The ceremony itself was poetry in motion. Gabriel had hired the city's most eloquent minister, a man who'd officiated at society weddings for 3 decades, to conduct a service that would be remembered by everyone present. Fresh flowers filled the ballroom with expensive fragrance, while a string quartet provided background music that enhanced the romantic atmosphere. When it came time for vows, Gabriel's words were breathtaking. 15 minutes of eloquent promises that brought tears to the eyes of guests and left Denise genuinely moved despite her guilt. He spoke of forgiveness, second chances, and the unbreakable bonds of true love. His performance was so convincing that Denise almost believed their marriage could survive her betrayal. "My beautiful wife," Gabriel said, holding her hands as 200 guests watched in rapt attention, "has given me the greatest gift a man can receive, absolute trust. In a world full of deception and betrayal, Denise has shown me what true loyalty means. She is my partner, my confidant, my best friend. I promise to treasure that trust for the rest of our lives." The crowd erupted in applause, and even Denise felt tears streaming down her face. For a moment, she believed Gabriel's words were genuine, that somehow their marriage could survive the secret she carried. The guilt was overwhelming. Here was her husband publicly declaring his love and trust, while she had been systematically betraying him for months. What Denise didn't know was that Gabriel's words were carefully chosen for their ironic significance. He was indeed treasuring her trust, specifically treasuring the evidence of how completely she'd violated it. Every promise he made was a verbal contract that would make her eventual punishment more devastating. Gabriel's vows continued with what sounded like genuine emotion. 15 years ago, I promised to love, honor, and protect you. Tonight, I renew those promises with the wisdom that only comes from time. I understand now that love isn't just about passion. It's about choosing each other every day, even when that choice is difficult. It's about being faithful when faithfulness is tested. It's about trust that can survive any challenge. The religious imagery wasn't lost on the assembled guests. Gabriel was positioning himself as the faithful husband, the devoted protector, the man who honored his commitments regardless of personal cost. When the truth about Denise's betrayal eventually emerged, everyone present would remember these words and the contrast between Gabriel's devotion and his wife's treachery. During the reception, Gabriel was the perfect host, introducing Denise to potential clients and making business connections that would benefit her real estate career, assuming she still had a career after Gabriel finished with her. He danced with her as if she were the only woman in the world, whispered romantic promises in her ear, and played the role of devoted husband flawlessly. Vincent Jackson wasn't invited to the ceremony, but he watched from his apartment as photos appeared on social media throughout the evening. Each image was a knife twist, Denise laughing in Gabriel's arms, the couple cutting their anniversary cake, Gabriel's heartfelt speech about trust and loyalty. Vincent's paranoia about Gabriel's knowledge of their affair warred with his desperate hope that they could continue their relationship despite the vow renewal. By midnight, Vincent was drunk and furious, sending Denise text messages she was too busy to read immediately. His desperation was making him reckless, exactly as Gabriel had planned. A desperate man makes mistakes, and Gabriel needed Vincent to make the specific mistakes that would provide legal justification for destroying him. The real coup de grace came during Gabriel's toast to the assembled guests. He spoke about family, about the importance of surrounding yourself with people who would never betray your trust. As he spoke, Sean's empty chair was visible to everyone, a pointed reminder that Gabriel Clark's forgiveness had limits that had already been exceeded. "Some of you have asked about my brother Sean's absence tonight," Gabriel said, his voice carrying clearly through the ballroom. "Sean made choices that put my daughter in danger. Family means everything to me, but family comes with responsibilities. When those responsibilities are abandoned, so are the privileges that come with them." The message was clear to everyone present. Gabriel Clark's loyalty was conditional, and those who violated his trust faced permanent exile. Several guests shifted uncomfortably, remembering business relationships that had ended badly when partners tried to cheat Gabriel. Gabriel continued his toast with what sounded like warmth, but carried undertones that only he fully understood. Tonight celebrates not just love, but trust. The trust between husband and wife, the trust between friends, the trust that makes business relationships possible. That trust is sacred, and those who honor it will always have my support. Those who violate it. Gabriel paused, letting the implication hang in the air. Well, they learn that some decisions have permanent consequences. Denise felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter weather outside. Gabriel's words seemed directed at her, though she told herself that was paranoia brought on by guilt. Surely Gabriel didn't know about her affair. Surely his increased attention and romantic gestures were genuine attempts to strengthen their marriage, not calculated psychological warfare. But as the evening progressed, Denise noticed details that made her increasingly uncomfortable. Gabriel introduced her to people she'd never met, but who seemed to know intimate details about her real estate business. He mentioned client relationships she didn't remember discussing with him. Most disturbing, he seemed to know about appointments and meetings that she was certain she'd never mentioned. The photography was extensive and professional, with Gabriel insisting on formal portraits, candid shots, and group photographs that documented every moment of the evening. Gabriel's explanation was that he wanted to capture their happiness for posterity, but the attention to documentation felt excessive and purposeful in ways Denise couldn't articulate. As the ceremony concluded, Gabriel and Denise posed for final photographs with their most important guests. Gabriel's arm around his wife's waist was possessive rather than protective, and his smile contained elements of satisfaction that had nothing to do with marital happiness. The last guests left shortly after midnight, and Gabriel helped Denise out of her elaborate gown with the tenderness of a devoted husband. They made love that night with intensity that surprised Denise, Gabriel's passion seeming to feed on the emotional complexity of the evening they'd just shared. But as Denise fell asleep in her husband's arms, she had no idea that the vow renewal ceremony had been the final act of her old life. Gabriel Clark had publicly celebrated their marriage while privately preparing to destroy everyone who'd betrayed him. The trap was set, the evidence was gathered, and the revenge was about to begin. Chapter 8. The Web Collapses. The month after the vow renewal was when Gabriel's true genius revealed itself in a symphony of orchestrated destruction. Every move he'd made over the previous months began paying dividends as his enemies found themselves trapped in situations of their own making, unable to escape the consequences of their betrayals. Vincent Jackson, desperate to maintain some connection to Denise after watching her publicly recommit to her marriage, made increasingly reckless attempts to contact her. These attempts were carefully monitored and documented by Gabriel's security team, creating a pattern of harassment that would prove useful in the final phase of Gabriel's plan. Vincent's text messages grew more frequent and desperate. "I can't stop thinking about you. When can we meet again? Your husband doesn't deserve you." Each message was automatically forwarded to Gabriel's secure email account, where they joined a growing collection of evidence that would soon serve a specific purpose. Meanwhile, the Riverside Commons Phase 2 project that Gabriel had offered Vincent began experiencing the unexpected complications that Gabriel had built into the planning from the beginning. Environmental surveys revealed contamination issues that required expensive remediation, contamination that existed but had been deliberately overlooked during initial site assessment. Permit approvals were delayed by bureaucratic red tape that Gabriel's contacts could have expedited but chose not to. Construction timelines were compressed due to weather concerns that were legitimate but solvable with proper planning and adequate resources. Each problem was real but manageable for a company with adequate cash flow and experienced project management. Vincent's company had neither. Jackson and Associates began hemorrhaging money as the project demands exceeded their capabilities, exactly as Gabriel had designed when he'd structured the partnership agreement. Gabriel visited the construction site regularly, playing the role of concerned partner while systematically documenting every mistake Vincent's team made. He arrived with solutions to problems that Vincent couldn't solve alone, making himself indispensable while highlighting Vincent's incompetence. "The foundation work is behind schedule," Gabriel observed during one site visit, reviewing construction timelines with Vincent and the project foreman. "We'll need to bring in additional crews to meet our deadlines." "Additional crews cost money we don't have budgeted," Vincent replied, stress evident in his voice. Gabriel nodded sympathetically. "Of course, Clark Construction can cover the additional costs and adjust the profit-sharing agreement accordingly. We're partners in this project, Vincent. When one of us succeeds, we both succeed. What Vincent didn't understand was that every favor Gabriel provided was documented in partnership modifications that gradually shifted financial control from Jackson and Associates to Clark Construction. Gabriel was buying out Vincent's company piece by piece, using Vincent's own desperation against him. The killing blow came when Gabriel's shell companies began calling in debts Vincent didn't even realize he owed. Through a complex web of subcontractors and suppliers, Gabriel had ensured that Vincent's company was financially entangled with entities Gabriel controlled. When those entities suddenly demanded immediate payment for services rendered, Vincent's company collapsed within 48 hours. The genius of Gabriel's financial warfare was its legal complexity. Every debt was legitimate, every contract enforceable, every payment demand justified by services actually provided. Vincent had unknowingly signed agreements that put his company at Gabriel's mercy, creating leverage that Gabriel could exercise whenever he chose. Vincent Jackson filed for bankruptcy on a Thursday morning, standing in federal court while Gabriel sat in the gallery, ostensibly there to support his business partner during a difficult time. By Friday afternoon, Vincent was facing lawsuits from creditors Gabriel had strategically positioned to move quickly against Vincent's personal assets. By Monday morning, Vincent's reputation in the industry was destroyed, his personal assets were frozen pending legal proceedings, and his professional licenses were under review for financial irregularities that Gabriel's legal team had carefully documented. Vincent went from successful architect to unemployable pariah in less than a week. Denise knew nothing of Vincent's professional collapse until he showed up at her real estate office, desperate and unhinged. The man she'd had an affair with was barely recognizable, disheveled, paranoid, and talking wildly about Gabriel orchestrating his destruction. "He knows about us." Vincent grabbed Denise's hands across her desk, his grip desperate and slightly painful. "Gabriel knows everything. He's been destroying me piece by piece, and now he's coming for you." Denise's blood turned to ice, but she forced herself to remain calm. "That's impossible. Gabriel doesn't know anything. You're just paranoid because your business failed." "Business don't just fail like this, Denise. Every problem, every delay, every financial squeeze, it's all connected. Your husband is a monster, and he's been playing with us like chess pieces." Vincent's desperation made him dangerous in ways that terrified Denise. He threatened to tell Gabriel about their affair himself, to expose everything in a final act of mutual destruction that would drag them both down together. "If I'm going to lose everything, I'm not going down alone," Vincent said, his voice carrying the edge of a man who had nothing left to lose. "I'll tell Gabriel everything. The hotels, the information you shared about his projects, the plans we made. All of it." Denise managed to calm Vincent down and send him away, but she knew he was a ticking time bomb. His threats weren't idle. A man facing complete ruin had every incentive to take his enemies with him. She spent the rest of the day in a state of barely controlled panic, trying to figure out how to manage a situation that was spiraling beyond her control. That evening, Gabriel greeted his wife with his usual warmth, asking about her day and sharing stories about Emma's latest achievements in school. His behavior was so normal, so unchanged, that Denise almost convinced herself Vincent was wrong about Gabriel's involvement in his destruction. But later that night, as Gabriel slept peacefully beside her, Denise noticed something that made her blood freeze. On Gabriel's nightstand, barely visible in the darkness, was a manila folder labeled Jackson and Associates Financial Analysis. Gabriel had known all along. Denise lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling while her husband slept peacefully beside her. Every romantic gesture over the past months, every passionate encounter, every moment of seeming reconciliation had been a lie. Gabriel had been planning Vincent's destruction while making love to her with renewed passion, using physical intimacy to hide his knowledge of her betrayal. The next morning brought confirmation of Denise's worst fears. Gabriel's behavior didn't change. He was still the attentive husband, still the devoted father, still the successful businessman who seemed to have everything under control. But now Denise could see the calculation behind his every action, the cold planning that had orchestrated Vincent's destruction while maintaining the facade of marital happiness. Gabriel Clark had played the longest, most sophisticated game of revenge Denise could imagine, and she was only beginning to understand how completely she'd been outmaneuvered. Chapter 9. The Final Move. Denise confronted Gabriel the next morning with trembling hands and tears streaming down her face. She'd spent the sleepless night rehearsing what she would say, how she would explain her betrayal, what she could offer to earn his forgiveness. She expected anger, violence, dramatic confrontation, the kind of explosive reaction that would match the magnitude of what she'd done. What she got was infinitely worse, cold, clinical disappointment delivered with the dispassionate precision of a business presentation. "How long have you known?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Gabriel continued eating his breakfast, not even looking up from his newspaper. The Wall Street Journal was folded to an article about construction industry trends, and he seemed more interested in market analysis than his wife's emotional breakdown. "Known about what, specifically?" Gabriel's voice carried no emotion whatsoever. "Your affair with Vincent Jackson? About 3 months. Your collaboration in stealing my business information? About 6 weeks. Vincent's plan to convince you to leave me? About 10 days. The casual way he listed her betrayals was more terrifying than any rage would have been. Gabriel's tone suggested he was discussing minor inconveniences rather than the destruction of their 15-year marriage. "Gabriel, I can explain." "No need." Gabriel finally looked up, his steel-gray eyes showing no emotion whatsoever. "I have transcripts of your conversations, photographs of your meetings, records of every hotel registration and restaurant charge. I know exactly what you did, when you did it, why you did it, and how much it cost." The thoroughness of his surveillance was staggering. Gabriel had been watching her for months, documenting every betrayal while maintaining the facade of devoted husband. The romantic dinners, the passionate lovemaking, the vow renewal ceremony, all of it had been performance art designed to gather evidence while destroying her psychologically. Denise sank into a chair, the full scope of her situation becoming clear. "What do you want from me?" Gabriel smiled for the first time that morning, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. It was the smile of a predator who'd finally cornered his prey after a long, patient hunt. "I want you to understand what betrayal costs," Gabriel said, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had built his empire. "Vincent Jackson thought he could use my wife to steal my business secrets and destroy my reputation. He's now bankrupt, unemployable, and facing federal charges for financial fraud that he actually committed while trying to save his company. Those charges will result in prison time." Gabriel's explanation was delivered with the same matter-of-fact tone he used for construction project updates. Vincent's destruction wasn't personal revenge. It was simply the logical consequence of poor decision-making and inadequate planning. "You destroyed him." "He destroyed himself," Gabriel corrected. "I simply removed the safety nets that might have saved him from his own incompetence." Vincent Jackson was always a mediocre architect who relied on charm and connections rather than genuine skill. When those connections were severed and his charm proved worthless, his true capabilities became evident. Gabriel's revision of events was both accurate and devastating. Vincent had indeed made the mistakes that ruined him, signing contracts without understanding their implications, taking on projects beyond his capabilities, and making desperate decisions that compromised his professional integrity. Gabriel had simply created the circumstances that made those mistakes inevitable and irreversible. "Sean chose drugs and alcohol over his family's safety," Gabriel continued, his voice never changing tone. "He's now serving 2 years in state prison. His son Jake is in therapy for trauma-related behavioral problems, and Jamie is working as a cashier at a discount grocery store because no hospital will hire a nurse who abandoned her child during a medical emergency." The pattern was becoming clear to Denise. Gabriel didn't just punish betrayal. He engineered situations where betrayers destroyed themselves through their own choices. Sean's drug problems had existed before Gabriel's intervention, but Gabriel had ensured that those problems would have maximum consequences for everyone involved. "What about me?" Denise asked quietly, though she was beginning to understand that Gabriel's revenge on her would be more sophisticated than simple punishment. Gabriel's smile widened slightly. "You're my wife, Denise. You took vows, twice now, the second time while actively betraying me. Those vows mean something to me, even if they meant nothing to you." Over the following weeks, Denise discovered what Gabriel meant by honoring their marriage vows. She would remain Mrs. Gabriel Clark, living in their mansion, maintaining their social connections, and playing the role of devoted wife in public. But she would never again have access to their bank accounts, never again make independent decisions about their daughter's upbringing, and never again have any privacy or autonomy. Gabriel had hired Kathleen Hutchins, ostensibly as a household manager, to help Denise with domestic responsibilities. In reality, Kathleen was a retired police detective who'd worked security for Gabriel's construction sites, tasked with monitoring Denise's every move and reporting any attempts to contact Vincent or other potential lovers. Denise's phone was monitored through software that recorded calls and copied text messages. Her computer access was restricted to websites Gabriel's IT team had approved. Her car was equipped with GPS tracking that logged every destination and duration of stay. Most humiliatingly, Kathleen accompanied Denise to all social events, introduced as a personal assistant, but functioning as a highly trained guard. Gabriel's control extended to Denise's professional life as well. Her real estate license was quietly suspended due to ethical violations related to conflicts of interest, specifically using insider information from her husband's business to benefit competing firms. The suspension was temporary but renewable, keeping Denise dependent on Gabriel's connections for any future income. Most cruelly, Gabriel maintained the facade of their loving marriage in public with performances that were masterful in their psychological complexity. At social events, he was the same attentive, romantic husband he'd always appeared to be. He held her hand with apparent affection, whispered sweet nothings in her ear that were actually subtle reminders of her captivity, and played the role of devoted spouse so perfectly that friends often commented on how happy they seemed together. "You look beautiful tonight," Gabriel would whisper in Denise's ear at charity galas, his words carrying double meaning that only she could understand. "I love having you by my side, knowing exactly where you are and who you're with." Privately, Gabriel treated Denise with polite indifference that was more crushing than anger would have been. He spoke to her only when necessary for household management or Emma's care, maintained separate bedrooms, and showed no interest in physical intimacy. Denise had become a prisoner in her own home, trapped by the very social connections and financial dependence Gabriel had cultivated throughout their marriage. The psychological warfare was subtle but devastating. Gabriel never raised his voice, never threatened violence, never did anything that outside observers would recognize as abuse. Instead, he created a living situation where Denise understood completely that her freedom, her future, and her relationship with Emma all depended on Gabriel's continued tolerance. Vincent Jackson's final defeat came 6 months later when federal prosecutors, armed with evidence Gabriel had carefully compiled through legitimate business dealings, charged him with multiple counts of fraud and conspiracy. The evidence included documents that Vincent had signed while desperately trying to save his company, documents that Gabriel's lawyers had crafted to be technically legal but practically damning. The fraud charges were based on Vincent's attempts to hide his company's financial problems from clients and creditors. When Jackson and Associates began failing, Vincent had continued accepting new projects while knowing he lacked the resources to complete them properly. He'd also provided false financial statements to secure emergency loans, hoping to complete current projects and restore his company's solvency. All of these actions were legitimately fraudulent, but they'd been committed only after Gabriel's systematic destruction of Vincent's business had made them seem like his only options for survival. Gabriel had created the desperation that led to the criminal behavior, then provided the evidence that ensured Vincent's conviction. At Vincent's sentencing hearing, Gabriel sat in the gallery with Denise beside him, playing the role of concerned community member who wanted to see justice served. Gabriel's presence was a psychological masterstroke. the successful businessman whose marriage had survived his wife's temporary indiscretion, supporting the legal process that would ensure his family safety. When Vincent's eyes met Gabriel's across the courtroom, Gabriel offered a slight nod of acknowledgement. One professional recognizing another's superior skill, the winner acknowledging the loser's inevitable defeat. Vincent Jackson was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison for fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. His ex-wife had taken their children and moved to another state after receiving anonymous, threatening letters that may or may not have been connected to Gabriel's network of business associates. As they left the courthouse, Gabriel took Denise's hand with apparent affection, playing his role perfectly for the assembled media and legal observers. To anyone watching, they looked like a couple who had survived adversity together and emerged stronger. The truth was darker. Gabriel had created a living hell that would last as long as Denise drew breath, a reminder that some men's revenge wasn't a moment of violence, but a lifetime of consequence. Emma Clark, now 12 and recovering well from her traumatic experience at Sean's house, remained the light of Gabriel's world. She was old enough to understand that her family had faced challenges, but young enough to accept Gabriel's explanations about business problems and adult decisions that had separated them from Uncle Sean and his family. Gabriel made sure Emma understood the importance of loyalty, the value of keeping family secrets, and the consequences of betraying trust. These lessons weren't delivered harshly, but woven into everyday conversations, bedtime stories, and father-daughter activities that reinforced the bonds between them, while teaching Emma the Clark family values. Some people make promises they don't keep, Gabriel explained to Emma one evening as they worked on her school project together. When that happens, there are always consequences. Good people who keep their promises are rewarded. Bad people who break their promises face results they don't like. Emma absorbed these lessons with the sharp intelligence she'd inherited from both parents, understanding that her father was a man who protected those who deserved protection and punished those who didn't. She would grow up knowing that Gabriel Clark never forgot a kindness or forgave a betrayal. Gabriel Clark had built his empire by being smarter, more ruthless, and more patient than his competitors. His personal war had been won using the same principles, not through violence or dramatic confrontation, but through the systematic creation of situations where his enemies destroyed themselves through their own choices. In Gabriel's world, forgiveness was weakness, mercy was dangerous, and trust was a privilege that could only be earned through absolute loyalty. Those who learned these lessons thrived under his protection. Those who violated them served as examples for anyone else who might consider betraying Gabriel Clark's trust. The final lesson was elegantly simple. Gabriel Clark never forgot, never forgave, and never failed to collect what was owed to him. His revenge wasn't a single act of violence, but a carefully orchestrated campaign that destroyed his enemies completely while maintaining his own reputation and relationships. In the Clark mansion overlooking the city, life continued with its new equilibrium. A perfect marriage that was actually a perfectly constructed prison, overseen by a man who had turned love into leverage and mercy into a luxury he would never again provide to those who proved unworthy of his trust. Gabriel had won completely, and his victory would serve as a warning to anyone else who might consider betraying the loyalty of a man who built empires by destroying those who stood in his way. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen, and I'll see you there.